right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pensive Politics with Mr. Watson. I'm your host, Christian Watson, as always, and I have, again, a recurring guest, Anthony DiMauro. I hope I haven't butchered that one, also known as Tony, and he's been on the show about twice or three times before. We've had a lot of good conversations. In today's show, we're talking about none other than the New York Times, one of the most maligned newspapers in the country, for good reasons and for bad reasons. And we're going to be talking about if one of the reasons that they are maligned recently is a good reason or not. So the New York Times published a story, an op-ed from someone who basically argued that Hong Kong is China. And there were a lot of folks on the right who said, well, hold up. If you publish an op-ed about this, then why are you not going to publish an op-ed from an American conservative on a certain topic as well? This, of course, comes from the backlash that Tom Cotton's piece received from a lot of New York Times staffers the moment it went out, and which led to the resignation of Barry Weiss and all that kind of stuff. So the question I want Tony and I to entertain today is that, does the New York Times, number one, were they right, or we're going to this, were they right to publish that op-ed and yet seemingly, not lend their pages to the voices of conservatives? Seemingly. Not sure if that's true. Seemingly. And two, does the organization have a commitment to, if it says that it adheres to democracy, does it have a commitment to extol those principles in its pages as democracy is commonly understood? So answer those how you like, Tony, but I'm curious to see what you think.
Well, I mean, on its face, I think it's kind of ridiculous to be upset that they ran an opinion at all. I mean, of course, I don't agree with anything in that opinion. I think, I mean, we could go through it probably line by line, and I could tell you that none of it suits me well. But I think that we should not be upset that they ran the opinion at all. I mean, I'm not sure why outlets should even be expected to run opinion sections that treat conservative and liberal opinions equally. I'm not sure that any opinion section has that obligation. Frankly, it's an impossible goal to have equal political representation. You're not going to get it. And I might add that most of the people who are upset at this being run are the people who call them, the enemy of the people. And so it seems strange that they should, on the one hand, expect the New York Times to sort of fill their need for conservative representation, and then on the other hand, expect them to be nothing more than the enemy of the people. So I'm not sure what would satisfy. I mean, I'm sure that if the Tom Cotton piece had been run with no questions asked, there might be less outrage, and there's something to be said about that. But again, I'm just not sure why we should expect outlets to run opinion sections, specifically labeled opinion sections, that treat these opinions equally.
Yeah, for example, you would not expect the Wall Street Journal editorial page to run an opinion section opinion piece that extols socialism. You wouldn't expect that. That's not what they do. They don't do that. They are a right-leaning outlet, a good one, I might add, that focuses on free markets. Wall Street Journal is literally in the name. You don't expect them to run things that are contrary to their principles. Similarly, the New York Times has been known, as one of the giants of American journalism, and they also have a left-leaning bias. And so the thing appears to be here. This appears to be a confrontation between appearances and substance, because a lot of people on the right, and I'm also on the right as well, I kind of share these sympathies, would say that the New York Times gives the appearance of appearing impartial, the appearance of being above the fray. It gives the appearance of, at least their editorial standards appear to give the appearance. Now, of course, if you look at their editorial board's endorsements for the last few elections, they literally endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016. So, I mean, but still, when it comes to a journalistic, standard, they do say, hey, we are open to a lot of thoughts. So does this instance to contradict that, or is this just a matter of nomenclature here that we're all getting bogged down in?
I mean, editorial boards make endorsements every, presidential election. I'm not sure what the record of the Wall Street Journal is, but you brought them up. I'm sure that they at some point departed from the New York Times endorsements. Nonetheless, while I think we're conflating two things. While their newsroom claims to be, the arbiter of truth and objective journalism, although there has been some pushback even on that notion. Certainly their opinion section does not, and no opinion section should. Of course, that, being the arbiter of an equal political representation or completely objective, fact-based institution within the opinion section is an impossible goal. And I don't think anybody should be shocked when more opinions from a certain political strain of thought appear in certain publications over others. I mean, it is the prerogative of each's opinion section to do that. And, just like I wouldn't expect Breitbart to write something flattering about Joe Biden, I would not expect the New York Times to peddle in large amounts of right-leaning opinions. I mean, they do sometimes. They have a few. But, of course, it's not something that we should expect. Brett Stevens and Barry Weiss isn't even there anymore. The number of conservative, quote unquote, opinion writers that they have over there I could probably count on one hand. So just playing the numbers game, for example, I don't think anybody should be shocked. So it seems like a bit of, fake outrage to the extent that it fits the narrative that this media is left-wing. It's against whatever I believe in. Of course, that might be a very valuable political strategy. And no matter how many times you try to have this conversation with somebody on the right who is criticizing the New York Times, they won't admit this because it just foils their political ambition. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure that anybody should be super upset that they ran this opinion. Again, criticize the opinion. Don't criticize the fact that they ran it. And I think that's the basic point.
You bring up an interesting point, but I want to harken back to something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned the sentiment that the New York Times that some people believe they are the enemy of the people. So automatically that statement creates a dichotomy. It creates a binary dichotomy that I am not sure is represented or sustained in reality. It creates the dichotomy that there are the people at large, then there are the New York Times somehow separated from the people, when in all reality, we understand from a purely ontological standpoint, the New York Times is ran by people. It's ran in many ways. It's ran by everyday people. I mean, there are some reporters. There's everyone from a Ross Duhat, who is like very popular European columnist, been on all to a janitor that helps keep the floors clean, to a receptionist. I mean, their headquarters is huge. I'm sure you've been by it. It's massive. But it's just, I find this so peculiar because it hinges on the idea that if something is not acquiesced to, even seemingly so, I mean, I don't think you can get the entire country to acquiesce to one thing. That's an impossible, unquantifiable task. But if something in general is not acquiesced to by the so-called people, it is therefore a danger of some sort. It is a legitimate danger. And that presupposes, I think, this idea that America, you may agree with this, you may not, is a democracy, which I'm not entirely sure that it necessarily is. So what do you think about this notion that the New York Times is an enemy of the people? I find that to be an unquantifiable, sort of hyperbolic claim that bears no semblance to reality whatsoever. That's just my opinion, though. Don't shoot me. This is my opinion, man. It's my opinion.
Yeah, of course, the New York Times is, the paper of record. I mean, certainly in the United States, it's a very important paper for most of the Western world, in fact. But so when that criticism is levied against the New York Times, I think the idea is criticizing the New York Times as an institution, and certainly not atomizing people at an individual level, comparing Ross Douthat to the reporter who is on his first week at the job.
But shouldn't it though? Because it's interesting, this idea about institutions. It's interesting, but institutions are fundamentally the sum of individual actions. One individual action can possibly cause an entire institution to fail. So when we're saying the New York Times here is the enemy of the people, we don't mean the New York Times as a paper, because as a paper, it was just like a piece of paper with the brand New York Times stamped on it. It would be incoherent. No one would be able to see anything. There'd be no value there. There has to be personal energy put into it.
Yeah, I mean, well, likewise, when they say the New York Times is the enemy of the people, they certainly aren't saying specifically Ross Douthat is the enemy of the people. So you are left with these word games. Of course, the notions behind them aren't going to be particularly precise. But when you criticize your university, you aren't criticizing all of the professors, adjunct professors, president, and vice dean. All specifically, you're criticizing the way the institution operates as a whole, whether that's the sum of individuals or the sum of only 3 of the top individuals. It's the name of the institution that's supposedly acting, and we take that to be the case. Of course, you could break it down, but I think that's being a bit too how should I put it? Epistemologically rigorous. I think that actually isn't very helpful or practical in terms of the way we observe these things. And I think that actually muddies the water more. So I think you can criticize the claim. So whether the New York Times is the enemy of the people, I think that's, of course, a hyperbolic claim. It's nothing more than political jargon and rhetoric. And, we should approach it as such. But breaking down the claim is, incoherent because it's, not criticizing or taking into account the fact that it employs thousands of people. And we should be criticizing it on a very atomistic level. I think that that's actually more difficult, and I think that hurts the way we think about things when we over particularize in a way that is just not practical to everyday experience.
I think everyday experience will lend itself to the fact that there are indeed thousands of people that work, or hundreds of people that work in the New York Times and lend their energy to the production thereof. But yeah, I agree. There's no need to go all the way down to the janitor or to the receptionist. There's no need to do all that because that makes no sense. But perhaps if you want to specify the claim to make the argument a little bit more coherent, you could say, okay, the New York Times editorial board is the enemy of the people. That's a much more clearer claim. It's still hyperbolic. It still makes no sense to me, but it's a much clearer claim. You have a set of people in the institution that you can actually analyze. You can analyze their actions. When you make such a broad claim, you make your argument subject to the words, the work of basically everyone who publishes on the New York Times paper or website. And you have to, for your argument to be verified, you have to actually, this is, of course, the unquantifiable part of the argument, you have to literally look at what they've done, look at what they've said, and try to see if it matches up with your standard of them being the enemy of the people. So you have a sort of definitional barrier that you can't really reach here when you make these broad systemic claims, I think, which is why it's...
Yeah, that's part of the strategy. Political rhetoric aims to give a sentimental feeling, not a factual one, right? So when Donald Trump gets up there on stage and tells you the New York Times is the enemy of the people because there's negative news coverage of him or there's some apparent bias that he's seeing, he's tapping into something that all of his supporters probably feel in some way, even though they probably haven't read the New York Times every day, like someone who is also sucking in their own bias by reading the New York Times every day. So it's one of those very strange things about political rhetoric that I think is more of an emotional appeal. Certainly when you tap into the populist strains that we've unfortunately seen, there are less, people who care about whether things are true insofar as, nobody's going through, oh, this is my standard of what an enemy is, and, the New York Times meets that threshold. No, what they're doing is I feel this apathy or anger towards this institution that is not supporting the political goals that I have, and this person who I do support is recognizing that and telling me I'm right. So it's a confirmation bias thing that really isn't even meant to be fact-checked. But I think it's hyperbolic, and I think we would stray against those types of things because those types of emotional appeals often do harm politics. But that is politics writ large for at least most of the 20th and 21st century anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a sentiment that springs from the wells of emotion as opposed to wells of logos. Absolutely. I agree with that entirely, and that's the problem. That is the problem. And maybe I'm too much of an idealist. I think I'm too much of an idealist, really. I think that, I am way too much of an idealist. When I begin talking like I just talked to you, to other people in conversation, other political writers are like, what are you talking about, dude? Put that stuff away. This is how it is. I'm like, I know how it is, buddy. I want to change that. I want to transform that. I want to engage in sort of transformative action because guess what? This kind of way we talk about things it's dangerous. It's really making us hate each other. Like, seriously. I mean, there are certain things that someone in conservative media, like what I aspire to do, can't say without being construed as a left-leaning person, which is concerning to me. And there are some things that someone who works in more left-leaning media like MSNBC can't say if they don't want to be ostracized. I actually say it's probably more of an issue over there than it is over here. And it's just really concerning. And this truth just oscillates through several areas of American politics, and it's just very concerning. And so, you can respond, but I just wanted to ask you, what do, do you think the press at large? You can segue in this after you respond. The press at large has a quote unquote liberal bias. So when I say the press, I mean, so I'll be specific: CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC. Those are considered the mainstream press. Fox, I would say, but it's obvious what the answer is for Fox. They don't have a liberal bias.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's no doubt on all the fronts. I think some institutions do better than others. I think CNN is particularly bad, for example. But again, when you watch cable news nowadays, I'm not sure that anybody goes on thinking, "Oh, this is my hard and fast, fact neutral." source for the news. I think I mean this is just my opinion. I mean, I think the Wall Street Journal does a pretty good job at this. I think they're the closest you can get. And I mean, so again, it's a value, it's a number of degrees, right? No doubt Fox News is aiming towards a right-wing bias, and no doubt CNN and MSNBC is aiming toward a left-wing bias. That's not novel, that's obvious. But then it's a matter of, well, what places are actually trying to obtain some sort of objective goal? Should we try to obtain some objective goal? I think one of the interesting things that people have said in defense of their criticism of the New York Times is, well, if these people are operating off of democratic ideals, and these democratic ideals are being violated because they are only publishing certain things and not the other things, and there's a plurality of opinion that is necessarily involved in democratic ideals, so they're violating their own ideals, and we should criticize them for that. Yeah, I mean, I could follow that argument, but like you said, nobody really knows what they're talking about, or at least precisely when they say democratic ideals. What do we mean by that? I mean, are we talking about? I mean, this is where it does get a little philosophical and a little more in the weeds, so to speak.
Right. It's laced with presuppositions. And it's laced with all kind of presuppositions. Okay, you say democratic ideals. What does that mean? Well, to certain people, it means, it means the embracing pluralism and having a sort of obtainable, accessible, equal footing in terms of discussion of ideas, all this kind of stuff. But it could also mean something entirely different, because the word democracy, demos kratos, that combination just means people in power, essentially. And I actually told a scholar, I made this argument with a scholar, and he was like, okay, yeah, Christian, this is the smart stuff, but like you're missing the point. And I'm like, okay, you tell me the point. So I mean, this argument may seem a little bit juvenile, but I think that etymology is one of the best ways we can at least begin to understand a concept. And as a philosophy student myself, I think that's just, if you're going to endeavor to try to understand a concept at its bare root, its etymology is probably where you're going to start. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's hard for me because I think I'm a pragmatist at heart. So things like that really don't mean, they really just don't mean much to me insofar as I think concepts have meaning. But when we talk about things about like democracy, I think you have to just necessarily understand what we're living through, and that is a quote unquote liberal society, right? That is, no matter what the Bernie supporters or what the Trump supporters or what the tradcons tell you, we're not living in a monarchy. We're not living in some sort of fascistic government. We're not living in a post-liberal world. We're very much living in a neoliberal world, and there are a lot of tensions in liberal society, because on the one hand, they claim to be value neutral, yet simultaneously tell you that this liberal way of life is actually the best way to live. So that is, for example, a fundamental tension that liberals in the philosophical sense, or the American political sense, need to overcome. And there are ways to do that. I think Talese, who's a very, not so well-known scholar, but he's a very good political thinker. I think he's very, very rigorous, very intelligent, and he offers a bunch of different ways. He calls it like a deliberative liberalism, and he talks about how democracy should not understand itself to be neutral with regard to values. That's one of those things that liberals always say. Instead, we should be neutral with regard to epistemological values. That is facts. So, we're going to tell you, there are virtues, but we're not going to tell you what claims are to be believed. I mean, I'm going off and off and off here, but basically what I'm trying to say is when we talk about democracy today, what we're usually talking about is this sort of comprehensive Deweyism, Deweyan democracy, where, there is a truth of comprehensive doctrine at the very center of liberalism that says we must be pluralistic and value neutral, but liberalism is the best way to live. But of course, any system that has as its premise the truth of any comprehensive doctrine is going to be oppressive in a pluralistic society. It's oppressive because it would allow the coercion of citizens in the service of some ideal. And that's a Rawlsian point, really. But yeah, so there's a lot of tensions with liberal societies. When we start talking about democracy and stuff, I really think that it's always going to be sloppy in the popular context. And the only way you can really get down to it is thinking through these things on your own.
Yeah, I entirely agree. And I think that a lot of folks, the problem is democracy has been accepted as a given in American political discussion. It's a given. It is an absolute, it's a lot of people take it as a given. They take it for granted. And the moment you do that, the moment you imprint democracy into the genome of the American Republic, is the moment that when you have any sort of dissent towards the idea or questions, even analysis of the idea of democracy in a serious way, what happens? You are considered by some people who may endorse the idea as a given to be anti-democracy, not anti-free society. They don't care about free society, or like sort of anti the people. Some sort of populistic, some sort of like a sort of leftist populistic claim that they might draw up out of nowhere, and that's concerning. That's concerning because, like, the Washington Post tagline says "Democracy dies in darkness," which just presumes. I mean, they're the Washington Post that America is democracy, and it's a little bit more hairy than that. I mean, we have some democratic elements, obviously, but it's a little bit more hairy than that. So, like, when we accept concepts as a given, as opposed to actually engaging them intellectually and fruitfully in that manner, what happens is you don't necessarily get a stringent, strict, or fruitful reevaluation of those concepts, and that can lead to all kind of misunderstandings. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that we're just going to have to learn to, and you might disagree with me on this based on what you said, but I think you just have to learn to live with the sloppiness of popular political discourse. I'm sorry. I mean, it's a fruitless endeavor to try to somehow, enforce somebody to adopt your comprehensive ideal of what should be done. Because even in, liberals do this too. And this is the thing, they want you to have faith in a pluralistic society. That's their comprehensive ideal. This is, I mean, again, the Rawlsian language. I don't particularly endorse much of Rawls, but this is where I think he's right. And that is going to be oppressive insofar as those things happen. So if you don't want that type of oppressive nature to exist in your society and feel like you're coerced to believe certain things, I think that you're going to have to live with the sloppiness. You can, however, say, oh, I want the function of the state to, allow people to be deliberative. I want them to consider things. That is the function of the state, right? You're going to tell me, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but I'm going to tell you to believe and decide, have reasons to believe. And so, and this is, again, very, very surface level stuff here. But again, like, I think you're going to have to live with the sloppiness of political discourse if you don't want to be coercive. And I don't think that there is any way out of it.
Well, I think we have to tolerate it to a certain extent. I don't think we have to. I don't know about living with it, because when I live with something, I'm letting it, harvest my energy. I'm letting it coexist with me, and I can't coexist with dysfunction. I'm sorry, but then again, maybe I'm choosing the wrong career path. Maybe I am choosing the wrong career path.
Oh yeah, in punditry, definitely, yeah.
Oh my Lord. But yeah, let's talk about, let's segue into the next segment. Let's talk about because you mentioned Rawls, you mentioned a lot of very, very smart points. Let's talk about this idea, because you've kind of segued this, that America is, you said America is a neoliberal society. And this is a point academics make all the time. And it irks my nerves for one reason. You know why that reason is?
No, what's that reason?
So that reason is that neoliberalism is often used as a conflationary bludgeon to attack free market policies that happen under the auspices of the current past American government, past 40 years. So, for example, I was reading The Long Honduran Night, a book written by, I forgot what academic it was, talking about, America's policies in the middle in South America, especially in Honduras. And the academic was incredibly smart. He used a lot of good information, rightfully criticized the Obama administration for supporting an illegitimate regime and, that murder people. Then they said, oh, and so this legacy of neoliberalism led for these military transactions to happen. I'm like, well, no. It's basically a buzzword against free markets, a buzzword against the philosophy of libertarianism, and I can't stand it. There are better ways. Go on. Sorry.
I mean, there was, I've had a lot of discussions with ardent Marxists. I mean, actual Marxists, not this progressivism that you see. That's not even close to Marxism. And nor is this critical race theory or whatever other postmodern jargon.
Well, critical race theory is Marxist influenced. It is.
But it's really.
But it's not actual Marxism. But
it's actually not even close because it all rejects the basic premise about.
Well, it does. Yeah, I mean, it's like deconstructing meta narratives and things like that. So it's not necessarily endorsing any sort of one system or another. But it was founded by Marx, which is like the point of consternation for many people.
Yeah. No. Postmodern thought is really it's just like
critical race theory.
Oh yeah, that's nothing to do with Marxism.
Yeah.
It really, but anyway, the point about neoliberalism, if you talk to actual left-wing thinkers, you're right. They do sort of use neoliberalism as a catch-all, and they say that neoliberalism is the cause for all these problems. And of course, yes, it is a segue to attack free markets. But I think they often misunderstand exactly what those types of things are. For example, they talk about how. I've heard a lot of conflation. Neoliberalism is the reason for, Trump's anti-immigration policy or something along those lines. And I'm like, well, that's absolutely not true. Of course, you talk to any sort of, globalist, they'll tell you that, they want to increase immigration. They like the free flow of workers is a fundamentally free market thing. In fact, it's that's why when you see that interview with Bernie and Ezra Klein, and he's like, do you want open borders? And he's like, no, that's a Koch brothers idea. I would never want that. Yeah, because the idea is that, and this is sort of the horseshoe effect. Both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, at one point anyway, agreed that, an influx of immigrants will drive down wages. And of course, a lot of the data shows that that's just not true. And, they say it harms the economy. Again, not true. They just use it for different reasons.
Right. And, and the fact that Ezra Klein had the audacity to say, oh, it's a Koch brother idea, therefore it's evil. That's an ad hominem, man. It doesn't tell me any. Again, it's a statement laced with presuppositions, which, as you said, reflects the sloppiness of our political discourse. I cannot tell you how many times growing up I saw senators on the Senate floor, particularly like Harry Reid of Nevada, who was the former majority leader before Mitch McConnell, say, oh, the Koch brothers sponsored this, the Koch brothers this, the Koch brothers that. And I'm thinking, the Koch brothers actually do a lot of great things, number one. They finance a lot. I'm not just saying that because I like them. I'm just saying that because it's actually objectively true. They are the number one financial engine behind criminal justice reform in America, number one. I mean, they have done a lot of things which have benefited a lot of people. And even in some, believe it or not, even in some libertarian circles, I get criticized for saying this. Seriously. They're like, really? Oh, man. So libertarianism
circles, that doesn't sound like it.
Libertarianism is not as... So there's multiple variations of libertarianism. There's right-wing libertarianism, and there's left-wing libertarianism. Like left-wing libertarianism is more like the Prodhorn kind, the sort of, we don't like capitalism, we like markets. That's like left-wing libertarianism. And they will criticize me for liking the Koch brothers. Believe it or not. And so, I mean, people think when they think libertarianism, they think Ron Paul or Rand Paul, and that's a certain kind of libertarianism. It's not, hey, I love both of them, but that's not libertarianism at its core. It's that's libertarianism laced with political, modern day political trappings. That's what that is. That leans to the right, and that is libertarian. I mean, I'm a right-wing libertarian myself, but still. at its core, libertarianism is something just fundamentally, the fundamental respect for your human being and not really going against them in a way that could aggress them in an unjustified manner. That's libertarianism, fundamentally. You forget all the crap, forget all the sort of connotations. That's libertarianism. But yeah, there are folks that are like, well, you support the Koch brothers, you must be a stooge and trying to get paid by them. I'm like, no,
Trying to get paid by them. Yeah.
If they want to give me a check, I don't mind that though. I don't mind. But yeah, so like it's just an example of how sloppy things are when the Koch brothers become a palatable political argument.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like political titles are all over the place too. Like, what is a right wing idea and what is a left wing idea, or what is a conservative notion and what is a more liberal notion. People are all conflating things all the time. I'm not sure. And frankly, I think this is seriously something that has happened under the Trump administration. A lot of things I say Trump is merely the accelerator of instead of the cause of. I think this is one of the things he's certainly, his political figure and phenomena has certainly caused. I mean, a complete just muddying of even further of political labels. I mean, for example, how could you tell me that free trade, that is non-protectionist policy, anti-tariff policy is a left-wing idea? And that's something I've been told. I mean, of course, this is anecdotal, but I feel like the jargon is clear. Like tariffs and protectionism is a right-wing policy now. Free market trade and globalism is some sort of left-wing, oftentimes conspiracy-laced agenda. And I'm like, where really I guess there's a lot of answers for where this might have come from,
you're gonna get me in trouble. You're gonna get me no. So President Trump, I do agree that his coming onto the scene has shifted up political narratives. Some people, or political definitions even, some people would say this is a good thing. Others would say that it's a bad thing. I am decidedly neutral, personally. I am neutral. Primarily because these tides of political, definitions, they shouldn't, but they shift all the damn time. You go 25 years ago, I think to like mid-90s, and you would have a Republican Party that was actively agitating for the abolition of the Department of Education. Actively agitating for the opening of board. I mean, if you go back to like 89 and 88 and 90, you had two very influential men in the Republican Party, Reagan and Bush, advocating for a very liberal immigration system. Like the debate in 89 and 88 was, okay, how quickly and how often can we get immigrants in the country? And through they talk about guest worker programs, amnesty, all kind of things that you would never see in the modern day Republican Party. All kind of things, all manner of things. And Reagan is considered the godfather of modern conservatism. Although I think that distinction goes better over to Barry Goldwater and maybe Buckley, and to a much, much more profound extent, perhaps Russell Kirk, who is really a massive influence on American conservatism recently. But so I think these things just shift and they change all the time. And I think that some factors can push them towards changing quickly. And I think that Donald Trump has done that absolutely. Now, is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. If you value consistency, it's probably a bad thing.
My take is like that combined with just, the other cultural damage that has already occurred. I mean, it's undoubtedly that in terms of political culture, Trump is a net bad. I think it's just, I don't know if it's even refutable. I mean, I'm not sure. Basic things, like even looking back to the vice presidential debate I saw a video pop up on Twitter of Paul Ryan and Joe Biden concluding their debate. And I said, this is so normal or that was the quote of the tweet. And I was like, yeah, this is so normal. What happened? And, of course that is just an appeal to what I, feel or what I perceive versus right now versus, that video, which was even less than a decade ago. And,
I actually remember watching that debate live. I remember.
And so it's like, I mean, everything from very basic conversation about politics. I mean, depending on who you ask, I'm a communist, I'm a right-wing shill, I'm a complete centrist, I'm a globalist who doesn't care about America. I have no patriotism. So again, the fact that I have all, depending on what political strain I'm talking to, very, very different appreciations of my political stances. I mean, this is just amongst friends and family members and stuff, obviously. It just should tell you that there's something very wrong in the way we're understanding each other. And of course, that might be another criticism of liberalism, right? We're all atomized as individuals, and we're really removed from communities and stuff. There are ways I think we can overcome that, but the populist movements that don't have time for nuance are bad. They're just very bad.
Well, yeah, I think definitions have very little to do with the social standing of an individual. Okay, actually, no. Okay, okay. Do I want to make that claim? I do. Okay, yeah. I think definitions have very little to do. In the sense that you mentioned it, of course. Of course, I mean, if you were in a regime that defines you as a menace to society, an enemy of the state, so to speak, and they sent the troops after you, they wouldn't see you as a human being. You'd be an enemy of the state. You've been defined as that, of course. So in that sense, it could. But like in the sense that you mentioned it, I don't think atomization, or as Tocqueville would have put it. I mean, Tocqueville hated individualism. I mean, he thought it was he called it solipsism. So as he would have put it, some sort of solipsistic mindset where like you're the only person in your orbit and the world revolves around you. I don't think that is what we're seeing here. I think you're actually seeing categorization, collectivization of individuals onto group labels, which is a very good tool, which is a very effective tool to attack and malign people as groups as opposed to individuals. If you saw a recognition of the individual, I don't think that it would. So for example, let me give you an example. So you would have, okay, let's go with Trump supporters, for example. They are all, it's as if people think they are a Borg collective from Star Trek. That's how people treat them, as if they are a Borg collective that cannot think for themselves, that cannot act for themselves, and that they all, Tony, hold on, man. Hold up, okay, my God, okay. You throw me off track. Okay, so like they're all like this one singular collective, but that is just to go against the truth of their nature. They may be coming towards some collective goal, but they are still fundamentally individuals with their own minds, hearts, and aspirations. And no one Trump supporter is the same, regardless of how they like to be depicted. On the flip side, I don't think all Bernie supporters were the same either. They were mostly young. That was also a collective quality they shared. But most Bernie supporters weren't the same either. Most progressives themselves are not the same either. But we tend to conflate. We tend to destroy the individual in these sort of beneath the weight and pressure of these terms, and see them solely as groups. So like when folks are saying,
I think that of course any group, you can break it down to who they are as individuals. But I mean, both sides are anti-liberal communitarian movements insofar as they're really not navigating the world as you should. And what I mean is, I think that any theory that wants, as you probably do, right, you want individual protection against the majority, but you also have to recognize that individuals aren't, they're not what Aristotle said, we're not isolated creatures, and you have to sort of understand both. And right now what we're seeing is two sides that are hyper communitarian in their mindset. I mean, any populist movement, again, is all about some sort of strange skepticism with the elite, but again, it's fundamentally about the masses, whoever these vague masses are. And I saw a Jay Nordlinger tweet recently that was, it certainly hyped my sentiments for aristocracy, and not actually, but his point was, the tweet was something like, look at these two candidates. This is what the people decided, the wise, the ultimate people, very sardonic in tone. And I was like, seriously? I mean, he's like, there were no, smoke-filled rooms. Bernie supporters might object to that, but of course, at the end of the day, when they consolidated votes for Biden, that was still people who weren't voting for Bernie. So I'm really not. Yeah, they did select these two people. I mean, you had how many candidates in 2016? You had 29 Democratic candidates, and these are the two options that we've elected to go with. So, I mean, I'm going off track. We were talking about Trump supporters and their communitarian thing, but I think it all plays into it. I think there's just a massive deficiency in who we are electing to represent us, and I think that we're making excuses for that oftentimes by just saying, well, it's the way that democracy works, and it's, I'm not satisfied with that.
So I see a contradiction in the Tony that is talking right now, and Tony that talked about 20 minutes ago. Because you said that the sloppiness of political discourse must be accepted. Then you just said, well, we can't accept things on the basis of this is how it works. I'm not satisfied with that. So take that dissatisfaction and decide to,
Oh, that's not a contradiction. No, that's not a contradiction. No. Of course, there's going to be sloppiness in the way we talk about where our politics land. Like, neoliberalism is still always going to be a catch-all. That doesn't mean we need to elect two 70-plus-year-olds who couldn't even hold a coherent conversation on national television to the highest office in arguably the most powerful country in the world. Those two things aren't contradictory.
So the way you explain it now, you've delineated them. One's about sort of more of an active thing, and the other is more just about just how we discuss things outside of the realm of the electoral.
Sure.
Okay, then that makes more sense. It makes far more sense. I'm like what you just said 20 minutes ago. Okay, makes far more sense now.
Yeah.
But still, even inherent in that answer is indicative of a desire to push back against the status quo. So even though, in general, even though,
no, sorry,
it appears to be. If I am incorrect, please correct me. I'm not right all the time. I wish I was. I'm not right all the time.
No. I'm not sure where you're going with this, so I'm curious.
I tend to be very eccentric in the way I make my arguments, so excuse that. But also I'm told. I don't know. No, I don't. At this point, I don't. Everything is eccentric these days, apparently. Nothing's eccentric, which is the problem. But so even indicative in your statement.
Yeah.
Whether it is to, understand that sloppiness will always be there, you don't want the sloppiness to manifest into governance. So even in that statement, it's indicative of a desire to fight back against some of the sloppiness's effects. Even if we say, so like, for example, if my phone screen is cracked and no matter how many times I replace it, it does not feel authentic. I can accept that the inauthenticity is going to be there. It's going to be there. I can't fix that because it's not the original phone screen. But I don't want the effects of the inauthenticity to seep into my phone, which is why I keep getting the screen replaced, or I make sure it's repaired so it doesn't have any malfunctioning. You know what I'm saying? So it's sort of a sort of dichotomy between the substance of something and the effects of the substance. Right, because both of those things have an interlocking relationship. So I get what you're saying.
I would argue this is just a philosophical point, but again, as a pragmatist, it's the effects that is the whole of our connotation.
Well, okay. I was never a fan of William James for.
Oh no, yeah, exactly, and I'm not either. He's hardly a pragmatist. That's the problem.
A lot of pragmatists say that. A lot of pragmatists say that. I mean, you guys are an odd bunch. I swear, you guys are a very odd.
I could go on and on and on. I mean, I'm not saying I'm wholeheartedly a pragmatist, but I would say that I'm certainly heavily in that camp at the moment.
We need to have a discussion about this because.
Yeah, I think we do.
Pragmatism is almost as in vogue and as annoying as stoicism is.
It's in vogue, is it?
Yes, it is. It's
really
coming. Yes, it is.
I've been waiting for this moment. All right.
No, it's almost as in vogue as stoicism is, and both of them are equally annoying to me. Seriously, both of them are equally annoying to me. The story of Epictetus is incredibly inspiring, but dude.
No, I'm not a stoic.
You have the ability to affect the world at large, my friends. You don't have to bow before, you don't have to be impish. You don't have to be impish. Oh, I can't affect this out there. I can affect me. You don't have to be impish. You see, that's my thing. You should recognize limits of your power as a human being, but being impish before, the world is not in my personal experience. Now, of
Yeah.
course, I come from this from an Emersonian point of view. Emerson believed that he literally said in Self-Reliance, the inmost can become the outmost, and you will have the universal sense, the universal approbation of the world. He believed that, if you connected with nature, you could change anything, you could do anything. And that is very different from the Stoic belief. That might even be seen as comical. But so that's the point of view I come at this from. But look,
Yeah.
has helped
I mean,
a lot of
well,
people. Yeah.
I was recently, it's strange because pragmatism isn't always thought of as a very political, as having a lot of political application. I think that's a mistake. I recently read this essay by, I think, I really, Yale Hungerford. I don't know how I came upon it. If I find it, I'll definitely send it your way. But I think it did a really good job of explaining the very political applications that pragmatism had. And again, we don't have to go off on this. I know that we were having a conversation previously about our current political climate, so I don't want to completely derail us. But again, I can, I'll just say that there are political implications that I think are very much would be very useful right now. So whether it's in vogue or not, I'm glad it is. If it is in vogue, I want to keep seeing it in vogue. That's good. That's good news to hear. If it annoys you, well, then so be it. But yeah, that's good news, I guess. So for me, anyway.
Well, from what I've seen now, of course, you should take everything I say about social things that are in vogue with a grain of salt. And I'm akin to an old curmudgeon. I mean, I still listen to Simon and Garfunkel, for goodness sakes. So I mean, take what I say with a grain of salt. But
Sure.
no, well, so Tony, you are an awesome conversationalist as always. I appreciate your insights. So just one last question before we go. We've got to go in a few minutes.
Sure, yeah.
Tell me, what is your hope? Like over the course of the next 10 years, what do you hope to see differently in the way we discuss politics and the way we handle politics?
Yeah, this one
Okay,
might.
give me three things. Give me three.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, I'd like to see, and again, this is gonna spur some debate, but we could talk about this later, if you'd like. But I think I'd like to see less political engagement. I think I would also like to see less. I mean, this isn't really about just I guess our politics, but I think that the executive branch right now is basically our legislature, and I think that that's a big problem. And I think it's why I think it's why we care so much about who is president, and that really should never have been the way things go around. And I think I'd also like to see people steel manning other people's arguments. I mean, this is if I'm ever an idealist, that's my ideal, right? Just see people actually engaging with the best form of everyone's argument. And of course, is a very, like common, basic argument that claim that everybody wants, and it's an ideal. It's not new, it's not novel, but I think it's a really good thing if we can manage it. So.
I agree with you entirely. I think still manning is one of the best things that I ever learned in debate. That's one of the best things, because guess what? If you knock that down, they don't have anywhere to hide. That's sort of an instrumentalist point of view, of course. Not that you don't do all that entirely.
And if you get knocked down, then oh wow, you better reevaluate.
Precisely. It's about finding the truth. That's all it's about. All right, Tony, you're awesome to talk to. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. We got to go. Thank you so much. As always, everyone, please stay pensive.